Good evening, or good day. It all depends, and welcome back to the Impossible Iron Man channel. Before I get to the subject of this video, I have an important announcement to make. I'll be doing my channel's first ever giveaway of some Hunt DLC coming up here soon. I'm working out the details, but keep an eye on my future content for more. Until then, let's get on to the purpose of the video. The Hunt devs recently laid out a roadmap for 2023. Check it out on YouTube. It's an interview with Hunt's new general manager, David Fifield, and it's a good watch. But easily one of the biggest topics that they talked about is the soon-to-be introduction of roaming bosses. There's already been a little bit of test server footage of this, not of the boss itself, but of the gator traps that they plan on using. It's similar to the way the snake dens were set up, and you investigate them like clues, and in Darksight you can see tracks. Let me preface this by saying that I'm really excited for the fact that they're experimenting with roaming bosses. And I also really like PvE changes. I know that's not the most popular opinion, but for me personally, any sort of PvE addition is welcome. But for this video, I'm here to see how this could potentially affect Hunt Showdown going forward. Let's start by addressing the two elephants in the room, as it were. The two overarching topics that will come up repeatedly throughout the video. The first being is, how is the roaming boss balanced in regards to camping and long ammo snipers? And the second being, does it combat the objective incentive problem? For those that don't know, the objective incentive problem is that most experienced players believe that there's no logical reason to push the bounty tokens. You might as well let another team do the work for you, kill the boss, defend the lair, and stay outside of their darksight range. Either wait for them to use all their darksight bonus in a siege, or wait to show up in their range when they stumble into disadvantageous territory. This is a boring mentality, in my opinion, but logically speaking, a lot of the time, unfortunately, it's correct. A roaming boss, however, has some interesting implications for this, which we'll get into. This leads us to our first question of, how is the roaming gator boss found? As I mentioned earlier, you'll be able to find gator traps located around the map, similar to the way that you found snake dens and snake ovens from the Serpent's Moon event. However, the key difference being is that the roaming gator boss is just that. It is a boss. So unlike the snake dens and ovens, it will most likely have the same range as a typical clue, and I imagine there'll be 1 to 2 a compound, so that, just like the other bosses, you can reliably track it down. This makes one wonder where the similarities end between this roaming boss and normal bosses. Can you stumble upon it out in the wild, just like you could a regular boss lair without having investigated a sufficient number of gator traps? Once you do you have a moving marker on your map? Are you able to track it in Darksight within a certain range as you could a normal boss? There's certainly a lot of interesting questions that I'm looking forward to having answered. But if I were to give an educated guess, I would say that, being that this is just another iteration of a boss, it's going to function in very, very similar ways, or as close as possible to regular bosses. Being out in the open, however, introduces some interesting variables that you wouldn't typically consider with the regular bosses. And that being is its route a predictable one? Once people get used to the event, is there going to be common routes that people can track down? Or is it concealed in a clever way to where, as you go about your business on the map, can you possibly get ambushed by the thing? And will that cause some disruption in PvP, which would certainly be something to think about. After speaking with Zen02 and Thistlewane on the topic, one of the interesting ideas that came up is that due to the fact that we know that this is some sort of infected gator, it could be semi-aquatic, which means that it could perhaps avoid detection unless you've gathered enough gator traps by traveling along the waterways, or maybe similar to a boss if it has a frenzy mode, it gets away from you temporarily by finding the nearest river or what have you and escapes so that you have to chase it further down the map or into a different compound or whatever. It's certainly a lot to consider with that and could add some interesting gameplay moments. While I'm sure Crytek has taken these things into consideration, I really hope that the boss has some sort of way to conceal itself. After all, I don't think any of us really want another tool for campers to use. Simply use it as moving bait to lure targets out into the open. Along these lines, I'm hoping that, similar to the regular bosses, it has some kind of indicator, either alongside the regular boss ones or one that appears once you've located it to indicate whether there is another team wandering around it. I think that's a great mechanic for bosses, and it should stay in any iteration of them. On the flip side, I also hope that to a degree you can manipulate where you engage the roaming boss, simply because long ammo snipers. If it's too easy to track, you can simply follow it around from 200-300 meters away and wait until a team starts engaging it out in the open. But as I said before, I'm sure Crytek has taken these things into consideration, and I'm really curious to see how they went about the issue. To neatly summarize these thoughts, let's go over some pros and cons. We'll start with the cons. One of the big concerns is that the roaming boss could be used as a tool for campers to abuse. Should it be predictable or too easy to track, or not have some sort of warning indicator like the normal bosses do, this could be used as an instrument to guide gullible teams out into the open and slaughter them as they go to engage the boss. On the flip side of that, in the other extreme, it could be abused by long ammo snipers. Simply watch the thing from 200-300 meters away if it's too easy to find, and pick off teams as they go to engage it in the open. So one would hope that you can manipulate where you engage it to a degree. One of the things I didn't talk about earlier is its difficulty. The current bosses have this weird line where new players have a lot of difficulty going about them, but the experienced players who know the boss weak points and their movement patterns and things like that, it goes from being too difficult to too easy. It's more of a nuisance to go about it. So one wonders where the difficulty of this thing lies. I did catch a little snippet from Average Joe's stream that I was looking at the other day. Actually, not stream, YouTube. And he mentioned that from what he heard, it's in between the difficulty of the current bosses and something like a meathead as far as killing it goes. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a quick thing once you do it. Like I said, there could be an aspect of speed introduced. Perhaps if it frenzies, it escapes temporarily and you have to track it back down again, which comes with a lot of its own risks out in the open, dealing with more AI than you would indoors, other players, things of that nature. So we'll see. And another one of the big concerns is, at the end of the day, is it going to be worth doing? And this, we can throw out hypotheticals all we want, but at the end of the day, we'll just have to wait until it comes around and see what we think. I'll definitely be addressing this again once it goes live, of course. As for the pros, this introduces more objectives to do, which I believe will help combat the objective incentive problem to a degree. More objectives means teams are more spread out, which means that there's less likelihood that one team is going to get singled out after doing the boss. This also introduces more opportunities for bounty, which makes running the gauntlet more appealing too, just more money for those that, at least that helps. I know not everybody has hunt dollar concerns. This introduces more PvE elements to the game. I'm definitely one of those people that always enjoys seeing additional PvE elements added to the game. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with Hunt. And personally, I think this will introduce some less one-sided fights. Now, this hinges on the roaming boss being balanced to combat camping and snipers and the like, but should it be balanced appropriately, I think this will lead to some fights that don't hinge on either being ambushed when one leaves the safety of a compound or trying to siege a stubborn team that has locked themselves inside a building, essentially, with the bounty. This will introduce more fights out in the open terrain, which means more of a level playing field. One last set of things I want to mention before I conclude this video is that the update that's coming up, which will eliminate the left peak advantage issue, supposedly fix the reload bug, introduce things like saddles, which are kind of cool. You basically be able to find them on horses or other objects throughout the map that will have supplies in them. It's a way to introduce more supplies onto the map, if you will. It also adds some interesting aspects for naked runs, for those of you who know what those are. And there's some audio fixes for elevation, since it's really messed up right now. But there was a delay on this. By the time this video goes live, it'll probably be yesterday when they announced it. They said that during the live server testing, there was a slew of bugs that they noticed, and they're going to move the update on this to a later date, which personally I applaud it. I'm really glad that they are transparent about the issue, and I hope for continued transparency as this goes forward. And I would much rather them just be honest about it like they are now and fix any issues that they find instead of just pushing it through and then trying to fix things on the fly, because that only serves to frustrate people. So again, I applaud Crytek for taking this step to ensure that we get a finely tuned quality update when it comes around. Kudos to them. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I am doing my channel's first ever giveaway of some Hunt DLC coming up here soon. I am working out the details, but keep an eye on my future uploads for when I work those out. I am also working, as you can see in the background, on editing the footage for The Next Players Won't Teach It, which is a guide about how to go about boss layer sieging. This will be at multiple ranges, whether your team has all long ammo, medium range shotguns. I'm going to cover the whole nine in this. So I know that seems to be my community's favorite thing that I put out, so I have this going in the background to show you that I'm working on it. And I think you guys are really going to like this one. I have some other things in the works as well that I will announce soon. So again, keep an eye out for those announcements on my socials. In the meantime, though, I will see you all on the next one. Good hunting in the bayou, everybody.